The tragic misstep, why consciousness is our curse. Imagine awakening one day to discover that your mind has evolved beyond its biological purpose, that you no longer simply experience life, but are now acutely aware of its absurdity, its fragility, and its ultimate futility. This, in essence, is the philosophical position of Peter Wessel Zapffe, a Norwegian thinker whose work remains one of the most profound and disturbing contributions to existential pessimism. Born in 1899, Zapffe was not only a philosopher, but also a mountaineer, lawyer, and satirist. His most famous work, The Last Messiah, 1933, lays the foundation for what he saw as the central tragedy of human existence, the overdevelopment of consciousness. Unlike other creatures who live instinctively, humans possess a mind capable of abstract reasoning, moral awareness, and existential reflection. But far from being a gift, this consciousness is a kind of evolutionary mistake, a misstep that allows us to perceive the world and our place within it with such clarity that we become overwhelmed by despair. Zapffe argued that the human mind evolved to a point where it could no longer function within the framework of natural existence. Evolution, blind and indifferent, had equipped us with a level of introspection far beyond what is necessary for survival. As a result, we live suspended in a constant tension between the biological impulse to live and the intellectual realization that life is meaningless. We are, in his words, a biological paradox, capable of imagining eternity and death in the same breath. According to Zapffe, this conflict between consciousness and nature manifests in psychological suffering, anxiety, despair, alienation, and the sense of meaninglessness. These are not symptoms of illness, but inevitable consequences of being human. To cope with this unbearable awareness, humans, both individually and collectively, have developed four main defense mechanisms: isolation, anchoring, distraction, and sublimation. Isolation is the act of filtering out disturbing thoughts from consciousness, avoiding confrontation with our mortality and cosmic insignificance. Anchoring involves immersing oneself in fixed values, religions, traditions, or routines, anything that provides stability and distracts us from the abyss. Distraction is the practice of diverting attention through constant activity, entertainment, or consumption. And finally, sublimation refers to channeling existential despair into creative expression, such as art, music, or philosophy. Each of these methods, Zapffe believed, is ultimately a form of self-deception. In his short essay, The Last Messiah, Zapffe presents the image of a hyper-conscious man who, upon realizing the full weight of his existence, is paralyzed not by fear, but by truth. This last Messiah is not a religious savior, but a philosophical one, a figure who pleads for humanity to abandon the quest for meaning, and instead to recognize that our suffering stems from knowing too much. He concludes that the only truly compassionate act may be to stop reproducing, thereby ending the cycle of suffering for future generations. While extreme, this conclusion is not born of hatred for life, but of empathy, a recognition that to be born is, in some sense, to be condemned. Zapfe's philosophy challenges many of the core assumptions of Western culture: that life is inherently valuable, that suffering has purpose, and that human progress is a moral good. Instead, he suggests that our pursuit of happiness is a desperate attempt to conceal the truth of our condition. In many ways, Zapfe's views parallel those of Arthur Schopenhauer and anticipate modern antinatalism, but his voice is distinct in its fusion of poetic insight and philosophical rigor. He does not revel in despair. Rather, he calmly dissects it, showing how our mental faculties, which we often celebrate as evidence of our superiority, are in fact the source of our greatest vulnerability. In a world increasingly overwhelmed by anxiety, overstimulation, and existential dread, Zapfe's work feels eerily prescient. Our technologies have advanced, our distractions have multiplied, and yet the core problem remains: we are too conscious for our own good. Modern man, surrounded by information and comfort, is more anxious than ever, not because life has become harder, but because the illusion of meaning is harder to sustain. Zapffe might say that our civilization has become a machine for amplifying distraction, anchoring us in consumer culture, isolating us from raw existential questions, and sublimating our dread into art and entertainment. But beneath it all, the human predicament remains. We know too much, and we feel too deeply. And in that awareness lies our curse. Yet, paradoxically, it is this very awareness that allows us to explore, to create, and to connect on profound levels. Zapffe would not call this hope, but perhaps it is the only dignity left to us, to face the truth squarely without flinching and to choose how we respond. Not with blind faith, but with lucid sorrow. The sorrow of beings who understand that life offers no answers, only questions. And yet, in grappling with those questions, we become fully, tragically human.